XT, XTS, EMT16, EMT16 Plus, MPT, and all the Bravos that correspond with that as well. So the thread break sensor, or the thread sensor on the machine, is located right here in the middle of the needle case. When you are threading a needle, the thread actually loops underneath the bottom of the thread sensor. So the thread sensor basically is, for the thread dynamics or the stitching of the machine, it's kind of the brain of that whole system. This guy is what reads pressures and other things of that nature that tell the Melco Acti-Feed, hey, I need to increase or decrease. So today we are going to address replacing this sensor. So if we come to the table, this is how a new sensor will arrive. So it'll be wrapped in the bubble wrap. You will go ahead and unwrap it. The PCB board is already solder connected to the sensors, which are on either end of the bracket. On the back side of the bracket, you do have these two nuts. You will have to remove those because you do not need those for attaching it to the machine. There's threaded inserts on the machine. But you do want to leave these button head Allen screws in the bracket because you will use those to attach the new one to the machine. The black and or red plastic clips that will be on the end of the sensor for whichever particular machine you get it for, they are super glued to the bracket. It's very important that this all stay together as an assembly. If it does break apart on you when you're replacing, call technical support because there's some things they're going to have you check before you put this all back together again. So best part is just make sure that everything stays as an assembly. So what we're going to do now is we're going to come over to the machine. To be 100% honest with you, the hardest part of replacing this thread sensor is you have to dethread the machine. So I'm going to cut all 16 threads right where they come out of the pinch rollers. I'm leaving maybe about a half inch of thread there. So that when I go to rethread the machine, I have enough to start it over or start with again. And then the next thing we're going to do is this cover right here is magnetic. So we're just going to take this cover off of the machine. And in order to remove this needle case cover, we have two button head Allen screws right here that we need to remove. And that's going to be done with the 2.5 millimeter Allen wrench that is sent with the machine in your operator's kits. So we will go ahead and remove these two button head Allen screws. And this cover just lifts off of the machine. So now with that needle case cover removed, we have access to everything that we're going to need to replace the thread sensor. So the first thing I'm going to do is coming in on the left-hand side, I've got a harness that I need to disconnect. Best way to do that is you don't want to be grabbing on these wires and pulling on the wires. Take your fingernail and there is a little lip on the connector that you can just use your fingernail or a little screwdriver or something of that nature, and that will allow you to unplug that harness from the circuit board for the thread sensor. So now the next thing that we want to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to remove the mounting hardware for that circuit board. So there are two little nylock nuts right up here on the top that hold this sensor or this circuit board to the needle case assembly. I'm going to be using a 5.5 millimeter nut driver. You can use a crescent wrench, a little baby adjustable crescent wrench. If you have some very small open end metric wrenches, you can use those as well. So we're going to go ahead and remove these two nylocks. And for the time being, I am still going to leave that circuit board just sitting on those standoffs, so it's up out of the way. So now our next item that we need to do is, if you remember when we looked at the new sensor, it had the two button head Allen screws going through with the nuts on the back. So we need to loosen those same screws, but where they mount it to the needle case. So if I look straight in, right inside of these black or red clips, you're going to see two button head Allen screws, one on the right, one on the left. Those are what we need to remove to take this assembly off of the needle case. So what I like to do is, when you're putting them on or taking them off, you've got to be really careful with your Allen wrench that you are not hitting this silver tube very hard. You can bump it a little bit, but you don't want to put any kind of dents or nicks in it. That can affect the performance of the thread sensor itself. So I'm going to come in over the top of the tube, and I'm concentrating real hard that I do not nick that tube, and I just go ahead and okay, I've got the right one loose. Now I'm going to come across and get the left one. So now I'm holding the sensor like this, and I need to get these wires out of the wire clips. So there are a total of 4 little white clips that hold the sensor, the harnessing for the sensor to the PCB. So these wires for the PCB, they're a pretty small gauge, so we need to be fairly gentle with these guys when we're taking them out. So now if we come over, there is our old sensor to our new sensor. So you can see you've only got 4 attaching points for the sensor, where it screws into the needle case here, and then your 2 up here for to hold the circuit board. So at this time, we're ready to take our new sensor, and we are ready to install. Now, I don't know if anybody saw, but I did drop a screw when it was coming out. Okay, there's a screw in the clip. Thank you, Nate. Okay, so on our new sensor, on the side over here, we have what's called a little anti-static clip. It's not static in regards to static electricity. It's static more in the sense of noise. So when we go to reinstall our new thread sensor, When we're tightening the screws, we're going to have to pay attention to this clip to make sure that it doesn't preload the sensor. So since there was nothing wrong with this sensor, I'm going to go ahead and just reinstall the sensor that we took off. But I did have a little malfunction, so I need to...
So while you're doing that, Chris, one of the questions that was asked was, how often and why would you replace this?
So it's not so much, so the question, oh, Nate's mic, so you could hear that. It's not so much of how often, it's as needed. So if this component fails, of course you're going to want to replace it. Now what is going to identify that this component has failed? Well, number one would be that you get just constant false thread breaks. That is where the machine registers that it got a thread break, but when you go check, your thread is still connected to the garment. But of course, you just don't want to jump automatically to this guy as it being the cause. There's multiple other items that you need to check. Thread path, Acti-Feed minimum, bobbin tension, presser foot height, things of that nature. It would be the same thing for false bobbin breaks. The machine just continues to get a very high number of false bobbin breaks. You might want to look at the thread sensor. Yeah, before you automatically jump to the thread sensor, give tech support a call, because they're going to give you the step-by-step run-throughs of what you're going to want to look at first before you go to the thread sensor. And also, I guess another one would be is your Acti-Feed is not responding as it should. So on your Melco OS, if you're on the advanced side, you have the little algorithm, or I call it the heart monitor. And you can see your Acti-Feeds doing this kind of stuff, increasing, decreasing, as the machine is sewing. Well, if that guy, God forbid, is flatlined, what it's going to do is, say like you have your minimum Acti-Feed set at a 4, that algorithm or heart monitor is going to stay at a 4. It never varies off of what your minimum's at. That also could be an indication that you've got a thread sensor issue.
You were talking about flatlining, and one thing I just wanted to add, you're talking about when everything's running in auto. If you're running in standard,
correct,
it is going to be a flat line, so don't stress out too much about that.
Also, the new software is 3-stitch average, so
yeah,
it's not going to be as reactive as it was before. That's on purpose.
Yes.
So, yeah, and
so like Scott said, the latest release of OS is doing a 3-stitch average, so you're not going to see that heart monitor go like you did. But if you see that guy flatline, I mean like where it never ever comes off of what your minimum setting is at, you could be looking at a thread sensor issue. Okay, so we are now ready to reinstall. So we're going to come back over to the machine, and I am going to go ahead and get my circuit board, and I'll move out of the way here in a sec. I'm going to get my circuit board on those standoffs.
My teeth grinding when I was trying to set up camera shots.
Okay, so now I have already got those 2 button head Allen screws set into the sensor. So now I'm going to get my Allen wrench in one. I'm going to put my thumb on another one to hold it in spot, and then I'm going to roll my sensor up, and I'm going to get my button head Allen screw lined up with the mount. And I'm just going to get it snug to where it's held into position. Then I'm going to come over to the other side and I'm going to repeat that process. And I'm just going to get it started. Okay, so now my thread sensor is installed onto the needle case, but it's on there loosely because there's a couple areas that I've got to look at real quick. So these red and black wires that come off of the right and the left side, very, very important. I've got to make sure that they're not pinched behind the bracket when I tighten it. If those wires get pinched, you probably are going to mess up your brand new thread sensor that you just got. So I'm going to verify that my wires aren't pinched. I'm going to hold the thread sensor up as high as it will go. See how there's a little bit of play in there? I'm going to hold it up as high as it'll go, and then I'm going to go ahead and tighten my right side mounting screw. Okay, again, I'm going to come over to the left side. I'm going to verify that that wire is not pinched. Now here is another thing that we were discussing. I don't know, there is that static clip right here. We talked about it on the new one. That guy needs to be making contact with the bottom of the silver tube, but not putting excess pressure on the bottom of the silver tube. So if we use this nut driver as a simulation, this is the silver tube of the thread sensor. My index finger is that static clip. It needs to just be making contact, but not putting excessive upward pressure on that tube. What that can cause is you can make the left side of the thread sensor read differently than the right side because of that clip putting excessive force on the tube. So I'm going to come across, my wires clear. I'm going to push my sensor up, and then I'm just going to raise that clip up to where it's just making contact. And now I have got, so the thread guide and the thread sensor itself is installed into the machine. I'm going to take my two little nylock nuts and I'm going to go ahead and get them reinstalled and tightened so that my circuit board is secure. Now, why we have this needle case cover off, this would be a good time to talk about a maintenance real quick in a place that you would want to avoid. I can't remember the maintenance straight off of the top of my head weekly, but you are supposed to lube your needle bars. So when you do your lower needle bars, you have got this cover and you've got these access holes, which allow you to lubricate the needle bars down here all the way across. When you do the upper needle bars, we recommend that you go through these vertical cuts for the take-up levers, and that's going to bring you in, and that lets you get oil on all the take-up levers, needle bars right here. Well, you've got a nice little circuit board right here. So when you are doing that lubrication, please make sure that you get the wick all the way in and to where it's darn near making contact with the needle bar, just because we don't want to get excessive oil all over this little circuit board. So now we've got our thread sensors installed tightly, correctly. Our circuit board is installed. I'm going to go ahead and put these red and black wires back into the little white clips so that the harness is held out of the way. And you will notice that the harness on the left side is a little bit long. Just do your best to get it up out of the way so that it's not pinched. And don't forget this guy. Reattach your harness for the thread sensor. I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus, but I've had a couple tech classes that I've taught where we've replaced thread sensors, put the machine back together, threaded it all up, went to sew, and got a false thread break instantly. So we try another needle position instantly. Then all of a sudden I'll see the light bulb go off above the student's head. They forgot to plug this back in when they put the new thread sensor on it. So you've got to unthread the entire machine and start over again. So as you can see, replacing this guy is not too bad, but you don't want to rush through it. Take your time, go slow. Like I said, on this new sensor, if this thing comes apart on you when you're doing this install, call tech support, but there's a very strong possibility that this guy might not be good anymore. There's a lot of little components in these black clips and things of that nature that can cause you issues. So just take your time and go slow when you're doing it, and I don't think you would have any issues replacing this. If you think that you have got a thread break or a thread sensor issue, just don't jump on Shop Melco and order one. Call tech support, have them walk you through some troubleshooting steps to verify that this could be the potential cause of what's going on. A lot of the times I believe that items are misdiagnosed and it's people think it's the thread sensor and it's not. We do get old thread sensors back and we will do a QC on them or a failure analysis, and this thing is okay. So something else was the cause, so just don't automatically jump to this being the issue. Our final step is to get our needle case cover back on. So up on the top of this needle case number, you've got numbers 1 through 16. Right below that is a little lip, and that lip has to ride in the corresponding lip on top of the thread feed assembly. So what you're going to do is you just get your thread sensor lined up with the cover, work your take-up levers through, and then I take my thumbs and I put them on number 1 and number 16, and I roll it over, and you will feel that little lip press right down into there. You can also take a little, just maybe, and give it just a couple little taps across the front. You've got your 2 button head Allen screws. They go right through the holes and thread directly into the needle case. And replace your magnetic cover. You're ready to thread and start sewing again with your machine. So again, this process that we just went through excuse me, will work on XT, XTS, EMT16, EMT16 Plus, EMT16X, Bravos that are all corresponding. So basically any of the most current stuff that we've got out in the market, this thread sensor replacement instruction will work for it. There are two different thread sensors. One is red, one is black. It's just aesthetics. They function exactly the same way. So if you're in a pinch and you've got a red one on a machine that went bad, but you have a black one, you can put the black one on, or vice versa. So hopefully this was really valuable for everyone. I believe it's going to be posted to the Melco YouTube channel as well. It'll probably be on the FAQs on Melco service as well. So again, pretty simple. Just take your time, go slow, and I think you won't have